People are starting to ask Kevin O'Connell to give up play calling duties. I don't think that solution really works. Let me explain. It's a Locked On Vikings podcast.
You like that? 3, 1, 2, 3. You like it?
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much to those of you who do listen to this show every single day. My hashtag everydayers. I love you all dearly. I love hearing from you, and I love getting questions from you. That's what we're going to do today. It is Twitter Tuesday. Thank you all so much to those of you who are also new to the Locked On Vikings podcast. Welcome in. Hope it's warm for you. You can find this show wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You can find it on any audio listening place, including SiriusXM. We're partnered with them. You can also find live broadcasts of all of the games, radio broadcasts on SiriusXM and on the SXM app. Just search out Vikings. You can also find this show on Amazon Fire and Roku or YouTube. If you want to find the show on your smart TV, just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. You can find it there. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. If you want to give me some questions, you can do so anytime. Just send them to me at Luke Braun NFL or at Locked On Vikings on Twitter. You can leave a YouTube comment. You can also email me at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com, or you can fill out the Google form in the show notes. Google form, people, you're on fire today. I love the questions that you were asking, some of my favorites. First one comes from Nano Garces, who asks, do you think that Kevin O'Connell should focus on only being a head coach and that we should hire a play caller for the offense? At LA, he delivered the menu and McVay chose the plays. It could work the same way here. So I don't think that solves the issue here with what the Vikings are dealing with in terms of game management, because my take on this is that in terms of putting offense together, and strategizing, I'll say, is the general term I will use. Kevin O'Connell's done a really good job. I think what he's done is actually super sick, and I love talking about it in terms of how he's trying to attack coverages and certain things. I think it really rocks, and there's a lot of intentionality to it. There's a lot of deep understanding of how certain coverages work, how the other team's coverages work, and how to attack and manipulate that. I don't want to take that part away from him. And it doesn't sound like that's what you're suggesting. You're suggesting to take away the sequencing. I don't think if you give the sequencing to another person, it changes very much. A lot of people are really mad about like when he runs or when he passes, especially like 2nd and 10 runs, but I'm going to burst everyone's bubble. Everybody runs on 2nd and 10 sometimes. Just do it. You put it to somebody else, they're going to do it too. Nobody is going to not do it. I'm sorry. You can give up that dream now. You just have to put up with it sometimes, learn to deal. But if you took away all that stuff and you made him just like an overall manager of the game, that's like the part he's not good at, right? That's the getting the play in on the sideline. That's the organization, the timeout usage, the 4th down decision-making we disagree with half the time, the 2-point conversions, so all that stuff. That's the stuff that we criticize Kevin O'Connell more often for than like, oh, that wasn't a very good play when you thought you might get cover 2. Like the latter is the part that he's really good at. Let's not take that away from him. What I think, if you want to, take more off of Kevin O'Connell's plate because you think he's taking on too much himself, give him a game management guy, which I think the Vikings actually have under contract, if I remember. That's, advising him, but just give him those decisions and say, all right, what do we do on 4th down here? You're the guy. That said, I think that kind of should be the head coach. There's just such big high level decisions that giving them to some like random guy up in the booth, I don't know. That feels like something that you got to own yourself. And I would rather he just get better at it. Ken Lovin says, do you think KOC gets too cutesy with his play calls in 3rd and 4th and short scenarios? This is such an interesting concept. What's too cute? Okay. What does it mean? What is a play that is too cute? Because let's take a play that's like, let's say a reverse. So, it's an end around to one guy, and then he pitches it to another guy going the other way. And then that guy throws the ball to the quarterback in the end zone who was leaking out during all of that into a route that shouldn't be covered. It's probably too cute, right? That's the Philly special. I just described the Philly special. It's a famous, one of the greatest things to maybe the greatest play ever in Eagles history was probably what you would call too cute. So to me, too cutesy is when it doesn't work. Then it's too cute. It's only too cute when it doesn't work. And that becomes very useless as a critique, because how do you solve the problem that's only a problem when it doesn't work, right? You got to make it work more. So it's got to be smarter. So I see what he's going for with some trick play stuff. The trick play that he called this week was on 1st and 10. And I actually appreciated that. Because on 1st and 10, if it goes wrong, you've got 2 more downs to make up ground, right? If it's 3rd and 1 and you take a sack, suddenly you can't go on it. You can't go for it on 4th and 1 like you maybe would have or something like that. In this game, though, he's way not cute enough, right? I mean, 2 QB sneaks in a row, that's as boilerplate as it gets. And it didn't work. That said, 2 sneaks in a row is not necessarily a bad idea. I went into the QB sneaks in a ton of detail in a wide left post that is either out today or tomorrow. The Patreon will be out at the same time. There's like a Patreon companion post that's a lot of the same thing. So if you've joined me on patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL, or if you have a wide left subscription, you'll get it in one of those forms. But the point of it is there were execution issues within the structure of a sneak and design issues, I think, within the structure of a sneak that harmed the chances of that play working out. The idea of going to a sneak is entirely fine, but you got to do it right. You have to attack the proper gaps, and you have to give your players a chance to execute there. Things can still go wrong on a play call that's ultimately a good idea. James Kunow asks, loved how you broke down your criticism towards KOC and the disorganization that we're seeing over there and that it's costing us games. As the helpless optimist, is there any reason to believe this can and will improve? Yeah, sure. Have you ever learned something new before? Have you ever been bad at something and then gotten better at it, especially in your first couple of years doing it? There's a principle in hiring that's like, I think it's an 18-month principle. Once you've hired somebody, there's a 6-month and an 18-month. And it's like, if they aren't figuring something out in 6 months, if you're not seeing anything in 6 months, it's probably not going to work out. And the difference between day 1 and then like your 18-month mark, they're going to be a totally different person. And if you think about it, this season started at the 18-month mark. Things are going to be still pretty new. I mean, I have worked 2 jobs in my life for more than 2 years. One was the job I had before Locked On Vikings, and then Locked On Vikings. The shows I'm making now in year 5 of Locked On Vikings, if you compare them to the shows I was making in year 2 of Locked On Vikings, which would have been 2020, boy, it's different. So of course he can get better at stuff. And that's why I don't really support, like, Kevin O'Connell is struggling with this. Okay, I support that. Kevin O'Connell, like the headset issues we had early in the season. That's a coaching issue to me. That is, you like, get yourself organized. If the equipment goes down, get your troops in order. That's your job, right? When I say that, though, that's a criticism. What I do not do is then follow it up with, and therefore he should lose his job. No, he just did this thing wrong and he's got to fix it now. And I'm going to point that out. But you can just point that out, throw it into the ether, and not have to come away with the next extrapolation, which is, and therefore he should be fired for it, right? We just point out that someone messed up. That's okay. And I think we need to be a lot better about that. Like, we're really bad at that. Sports fans are notoriously bad problem solvers. Everything, you only have a hammer and everything looks like a nail. Every problem is the solution proposed is to bench that guy, fire that guy, cut that guy, trade that guy away, right? That's the only suggestions you'll ever see. And I think part of it comes from the general like inaccessibility of football, right? If I say something like the motion that went into the second QB sneak tipped off the snap count so that the play side defensive tackle could time the snap, that's an interesting problem. And take the motion away is a solution to that problem. Fire Kevin O'Connell is a little bit nuclear, right? But a lot of average fans aren't going to, if you've been listening to Locked On Vikings, I hope you get that, but a lot of average fans aren't. And I think that that's part of the issue. And what I like to do on this show is to try to take people along, because I think football should be for everybody in whatever level of depth they want to engage with it. I have so many more questions. I spent too much time on the first few again. I always do this. So I'm going to go rapid fire here coming up on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime. If you are trying to head to a show, let's say you are really into the Vikings here, you want to get to a game before this cool, weird season is over. You maybe want to get to the Packers game on New Year's Eve party, or maybe even to the whiteout game, and you need last-minute tickets, head to Gametime. They're the place specifically for flash sales and last-minute deals, because last-minute tickets get marked up to heck. Right? They're the ones trying to find things on sale for you and trying to go through all the different markets and give you something that is the best price. And they're very confident that they can find you the best price. They have a Gametime guarantee, which means if you find tickets in the same section and row for less as what Gametime had for you, they will credit you 110% of the difference. They're that confident that they will get the best deal. You can pick the section, and Gametime picks the seats for an average of 18% savings if you want. Find exclusive flash deals for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. Once you're done with this, I would love it if you checked out the Locked On Sports Minnesota 24/7 YouTube feed. It's a 24/7 loop of all things Locked On Minnesota sports. We pump out so many shows just like this one that are daily shows. Locked On Wolves, Wild, Twins, all kinds of shows on the Locked On Minnesota Sports channel. There is a lot. So go check that out. Throw it on in the background, right? And if you're watching this on YouTube, it should take you right there after this show ends. So you don't even have to push any buttons. Just let it take you on a journey into the void of Minnesota sports. Anti-Gravity asks, sell me on being excited for a losing playoff berth. Losing record playoff berth. Speaking of the void. Hint, I think it starts with beating the Packers out of the final spot. Well, you answered your own question. That's great, right? So a losing record playoffs, so say the Vikings go 8-9 and make the playoffs, which is very possible. There are 4 7-7 teams right now. If 3 of them go 8-9, which is not impossible because I don't think they play each other. The Rams play the Saints, but that's it. And the Rams play the Seahawks. So that's actually pretty possible. The Vikings will have the tiebreakers. They have the best tiebreakers of those 4. So all they have to do is be tied for the 7th seed to get a playoff berth at 8-9. Very much in the cards. I don't think it's likely, but it's like definitely possible, right? So lots of funny things can happen. It can be the reason the Packers missed the playoffs. Very funny. Would love to lord that over Packers fans, especially because we'd be like, you guys couldn't even beat out an 8-9 team. You split with an 8-9 team, maybe, or maybe even got swept by them. Maybe that's the one win for the rest of the season, and we get swept by the Lions. For 2, maybe get a Lions game, because if the Vikings go 8-9, that means they lost at least 1, maybe 2 to the Lions. Eagles are reeling. Cowboys are reeling. The Lions might get the 2 seed, and the Vikings would be the 7 seed, and the Vikings would go play a 3rd one in Detroit. And then imagine, after this whole Cinderella season that Detroit is having, losing to the Vikings in Ford Field to a stupid 8-9 team led by Nick Mullins. The opportunity to do that would be so funny. I don't care about anything else. This is not a championship team, all right? We've known that the quarterback got hurt. We got to accept that, right? You just got to take that on the chin. But we can still make something very fun worth talking about out of this by making the playoffs with a losing record and then handing somebody the most frustrating upset they have ever endured in their lives. Grill asks, Seifert had a tweet about defense in specific quarters. Quarters 1 to 3, 4.5 points per game. Number 1 in the NFL. Quarters 4 and OT, 10.5 points per game, which is second to last in the NFL. What's going wrong in Q4? Is it just skewed data from this most recent game? It's not skewed because they've given up a lot in Q4. I think once the game starts to warp and game situation starts to warp, the Vikings have employed some bad strategies, from the turtling earlier in the month in November to, some bad meltdowns, blowing leads. I think when situational football has gotten involved, the Vikings have had some of their worst moments. Are they necessarily situational moments? Not always. Sometimes it's just you threw a bad interception, but you threw a bad interception at the worst time. And that is from when Kirk was still healthy all the way through Dobbs and Mullins. Everybody's done it. So the excuses don't really, they've just been bad in late game situations, in all late game situations. It's hard to nail down a pattern, but you can still call it a failure. It's been a failure. And I think situational football has a lot to do with it. 50-year Vikings fan says, do you think the receivers played better with Mullins? And if so, why? Velocity or timing issues? So the passes were more accurate than with Dobbs. They weren't accurate. The receivers still had to do stuff, but like they could. It's the difference between having to outstretch your arms just to get a fingertip on the ball and having to outstretch your two arms to be able to get both hands on the ball. Part of it is having a healthy Justin Jefferson too. Dobbs never had that. He had that for half a quarter, right? And got some good catches from Justin Jefferson. So part of that's just JJ making good plays. Hawkinson had a better game in terms of contested catches. That I don't think that has a lot to do with quarterbacking. That's just he had a better one that time. But it has been a little easier, let me say a little more possible with the Mullins inaccurate passes. Also, Mullins misses low more often, which is, I think, sometimes easier to deal with than misses that are high. Misses that are high, you go up, they're hospital balls, they cause you to contort a little bit more. When you go low, you got to pick those things up off the ground. But I think that the way that our bodies are constructed, we're a little bit easier. It's a little bit easier for us to bend that way. And that has led to things like Addison being able to make, still catches outside of frame, catches on inaccurate passes. But yeah, I would rather miss low than miss high for a number of reasons, and that's one of them. Pellyvike says, forget Brandon Powell. Can we talk about why Mullins went immediately into the fetal position as soon as he hiked the ball? I assume you're talking about the last QB sneak in this Bengals game. No attempt to reach the line to gain. So I go over that actually in detail in the Wide Left and Patreon piece. So if you want film and stuff, go check those out. But basically, the Bengals timed the snap. Number 95 on the Bengals, I forget his name, but good job. Great play for 95. He timed the snap up well. He got off the ball faster than Dalton Reisner and Garrett Bradbury could. Bradbury took the brunt of that, got knocked back, and his rear end hit the ball, and it was all Mullins could do not to fumble. So you can say that was a failure on Garrett Bradbury's end. I think it's a little hard because he didn't get the deconstruction that he usually will get on that kind of thing. I mean, he's still in the middle of his snap and accepting contact. There's not a lot a center can do there. I know people get really weird when I make excuses for Garrett Bradbury, but I'm sorry. Like, you're bending over. It's a guy's hit your shoulder. You're not doing anything. All he had to do was step back and anchor, which he did. But when you step back, you're then hitting the ball. So it's because the center got blown up. That's why. Sports Guy says, you've mentioned the volume of turnovers for the season falls on the coaching. What things could the coaching staff have done earlier in the year / can they do for next season to cut down on the number of turnovers? This is a tough question because they did a lot. And while I still hold true to like, you didn't solve the problem and that is a true fact. I'm sorry. You tried, you didn't. It'd be a lot worse if they didn't try to solve the problem, right? But they failed to solve the problem. What they did was they drilled it more. They drilled fumble stuff and it just didn't work. So I don't know what you can do in the future because I don't know exactly what drills they did. They just said they were drilling it a lot. So I don't know different ones, but I can't really be any more specific than that because I don't know what we're coming from. But there are ways to drill fumbling, right? Like there's a reason nobody else fumbles as much as the Vikings do. It's no way to prevent this, says only team this keeps happening to, right? There's got to be a way to prevent it. In terms of the interceptions, have your QB stay healthy or have a safer QB, right? A safer backup QB. If you want less interceptions, sign Sean Mannion. You might not like that solution, but it'll solve that problem. But yeah, that might not be like a winning strategy. It kind of depends on who you're talking about, right? There are some guys that only Brandon Powell fumbled once this year on a punt return in, I think, the second game of the year. That's all of that's been. So do you need to solve that problem? I don't know. It seems like it was just a one-off thing for him. But it was a one-off thing for like 10 different guys. So it's a really difficult problem to nail down. Is there something they can do? Of course, absolutely. I don't know if I'm going to be able to nail that down for you, though. I've got a few more questions I want to make sure that I get to, so we're going to rock and roll here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Look, if you are hiring, especially for a small business, you want to cast the widest net possible. And you also need some tools to help you narrow that stuff down, because a big old stack of resumes is just going to overwhelm you. Hiring is a process that needs to probably happen fast, right? You're usually on a pretty fast track for that, but it's also a really, really big bet. And if you mess it up, you waste like 3 months of time and resources on training someone that might not work out. You got to get this right. That's what LinkedIn is for. They can help you get qualified candidates within 24 hours. In fact, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. The process is intuitive, quick, and easy, and they know that especially if you're hiring for a small business, you have a million other things going on. You can't exactly spend, all of your day on hiring, so they can help you get your candidate and save you that time and those resources. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, which makes the process even quicker and easier. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Moving right along with this episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast. It's Twitter Tuesday, and I'm answering your questions. Next question comes from Andy, who asks, do you think that moment where Flores told KOC to call a timeout was as big a deal as everyone on Vikings Twitter wants it to be? Okay, so to catch you up, if you missed the game on TV, this was also asked and answered, I think, after Andy posted this question. This was asked and answered in the presser. So what happened was, after the 3rd and 1 in overtime, the 3rd and 1 sneak that led to the 4th and 1 sneak that led to the turnover on downs, and then the Bengals scored. This is where we're at. 3rd and 1 happens, and it kind of looked like it was close. And they took the time to measure it. They decided the Vikings were short, and the Vikings went for it on 4th down. The camera cut to Kevin O'Connell at a certain point, and Brian Flores was going, timeout, 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 timeout. He's yelling, timeout, timeout, trying to urge Kevin O'Connell to take a timeout. What Brian Flores wanted was for the Vikings to take a timeout so the refs could take another look at the spot, because he thought maybe they got it. The refs, unbeknownst to Brian Flores, had already told Kevin O'Connell, we took another look at it, it held up, this is our decision. So another timeout wouldn't have done anything. Flores didn't know that, right? And I'm sure that was cleared up instantly as soon as the camera cut away. That's what Kevin O'Connell said in the presser. He explained that whole situation. So no, of course it wasn't a big deal. I think people always make too much of a big deal out of these things. I'll let you in on a secret. A lot of coaches don't like their head coach. It's just a thing. And they put up with it. It's, you like your boss? Half of you say no. Like, it's just a thing. You put up with it and it's fine. It's not the biggest schism in the world when somebody doesn't like their coach. And we don't know whether or not Brian Flores actually likes Kevin O'Connell or respects him any more than what he'll tell us in a press conference, which will all be perfectly positive. It's not a story. It's not worth really investigating, because we can't get any answer that's anything real. People are just clickbaiting you. Noted Undesirable asks, why do the Vikings corners give up when the ball is in the air? If you're talking about Mekhi Blackmon, who on the ridiculous T. Higgins touchdown over, I think it was a Caleb Evans was in coverage there. He catches the ball, gets his feet down at the 1, reaches over. Crazy touchdown. Mekhi Blackmon's just standing there and watching. He thought that a Caleb Evans got a pick. He tweeted later. He's like, yeah, I thought a Caleb was going to get another pick there. My bad. And he just was like, yeah, I beefed that one. And he just like owned up to it. So Mekhi Blackmon beefed one. But when it comes to everybody else, give up is a pretty bad word to use. I think that's a fairly poor description of losing contested catches. T. Higgins is really good at that. He just beat our guys. It's not an issue of effort. Sometimes you get beat. You can try really hard and get beat by T. Higgins. It happens. Sam Root says, something I've noticed a lot is we'll come out in a bunch trips, and then right before the snap, the innermost receiver from the bunch will motion to the outside to form like a slanty 3-man stack. You guys know what I'm talking about? I've noticed this too. He says, got any thoughts about this? Obviously, it's disguising the release, but I'm curious if you have any idea about what it's attacking. Thank you for giving me an excuse to talk about this. I think it's really cool. So if you understand what he's talking about, you think about a bunch, right? It's a triangle. You've got 1, 2, 3 guys in a triangle. And usually the point man of the bunch, the guy at the front, there's one guy who's lined up on the line of scrimmage and then 2 guys behind him flanking him on either side. The guy in the front's called the point man. And when you're covering against a bunch, most coverages, many coverage rules will identify the point man and use that to relate and communicate. I've got the point man, you've got the first in, you've got the first out. That'll be a thing, right? So when you motion to basically untangle that bunch and turn it into a 1-2-3 situation, for one, you've taken the number 3 receiver, the way that defenses communicate this, which is the third guy in. They count from the outside in, 1, 2, 3. So you've taken the number 3 and turned him into the number 1. And you've taken the number 2 and turned him into the number 3. And you've taken the number 1 and you've turned him into the number 2. So you've totally reshuffled that. And so they've got to all make sure that they've got their rules on lock. And if anybody messes it up, it's a busted coverage. It's the biggest play in the world, which is a pretty good thing that could possibly happen for the cheapness of a quick motion. Plus, you've messed up who the point man is. Because a lot of those coverages will say, okay, I'll take the inside guy. You take the outside guy, and you take the point man, right? But what if the point man and the inside guy are the same guy now? Do we change? Do we not? Did we talk about this before? It's a chance for the defense to screw things up. I think it's really cool. The 14-yard line that tackled Danny Dimes. I love that username so much. Says, who are your top 3 pending free agents you think the Vikings need to re-sign in the 2024 offseason? I'll try to do this off the dome. Daniil Hunter. They already did Josh Metellus. Who else from the 2020 draft class? They already traded away Ezra Cleveland. I would have said him. I give up. I'm going over the cap. Dalton Reisner comes to mind. If he's going to be our starting guard, I'd like to bring him back. And you know what? There's Cam Akers. I would bring Dobbs back for sure. I would bring Sheldon Day back for sure. There's definitely a few names on here. I think I'd let most of these names go pretty easily. Daniil Hunter is the big one. That one is non-negotiable. I think I agree with somebody else who asked a question about KJ Osborne. I probably wouldn't bring him back. I don't think you need to pay him. And then it's, between Reisner, Dobbs, and Akers. I'm going to say Reisner and Akers. And Josh Dobbs, thanks for the fish, but good luck in your next chapter. Next one comes from Gary Melbrick, who asks, if a head coach has questions, who does he ask? His staff, man. That's what they're there for. That's why young head coaches surround themselves with experienced former head coaches like Mike Pettin and Brian Flores, right? Mike Zimmer, he was experienced as all get out, but he would always surround himself with former head coaches. That's part of it, and a lot of them also have mentors. Kevin O'Connell will probably text Sean McVay and ask him questions, and Sean McVay will answer them. It doesn't matter that they're racing each other for a playoff spot right now. Those personal relationships go a little bit beyond that, and ultimately these are humans that are going to be kind to each other. Scooter asks, after the offense plays horribly in a win, the fan base is critical, they think the team is doomed, and the victory is labeled an ugly win. However, if the defense plays horribly in a 42-39 win, the criticism would be minimal, and the win certainly wouldn't be labeled as ugly. Why the double standard? Aren't offense and defense equally important? Cook, Scooter! Yes, true. Absolutely. Ugly win. People like to watch offense. So if there isn't offense, it's labeled a bad game. But if the same unit, if you look at, this is how people talk about college football. I can't stand SEC games or like these Pac-12 games that go 55-60. It's like, well, they're just going to score every drive until one person messes up. I would honestly, I enjoy that as much as I enjoy a 0-3 slop fest. I can get behind a game that, is got one team super dominating the other on one side of the ball. I can get behind it, but I'm not going to enjoy it nearly as much as a back and forth 27-24 thing with all these interesting things going on, right? Absolutely true. You're super right. The double standard is because people like offense better than defense. That's kind of the thing of double standards. Is that it's because you like one more than the other. Last one comes from Get Quackin', who says, did Flores get solved? I am going to spend all day tomorrow looking into that, and I will get back to you for the Wednesday edition of the Locked On Vikings podcast. I will see you all for that. And as always, Skull.